This audio presentation of Hi Dad is brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. Written by Herbert Ewing Duncan. Executive producers: Scottish Rite Grand Commander James D. Cole, 33rd degree. Grand Master of DeMolay John Sellars and DeMolay Grand Secretary Stephen E. Crane. Narrated and produced by Matt Bowers, 32nd degree. Consulting producer Dean Alban, 33rd degree. Hi Dad Book, copyright 1981. Audio recordings copyright 2023. All rights reserved. For information on how you can donate to support this audio serial, visit DeMolay.org. Chapter 6. DeMolay Reaches Out. Asa D. Hurd, businessman, physical fitness expert, and District Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Missouri, looked at his Sunday school class in the Linwood Christian Church. He saw a large class of boys, 15 years of age, who listened as he began his lesson. Last night, I was in the Scottish Rite Temple. There must have been 300 boys there, all engaged in some activity and having a whale of a time. A boxing ring had been erected in one of the rooms, and in the center of the ring was the Reverend Earl Blackman, bobbing, weaving, and throwing punches in the air. As he shadowboxed, he gave instructions and dropped an imaginary opponent to the canvas. The boys were excited, for Earl Blackman had been known during the war as the Fighting Parson. An army chaplain, I have been told, was regarded by the men as sort of a sissy. So on Earl's first assignment, he posted a notice stating that the chaplain would take on all comers in the squared circle. He told me he was kept pretty busy until they found that he had been a professional boxer before entering the ministry. I had never heard of this club for boys, but I understand they have a beautiful ritual. They call it DeMolay or something like that. Maybe it is DeMolay from the last of the Templars, but I think it is DeMolay. You fellows are too young to join. You must be 16. When you are old enough, I want to be the one to sign your petitions. This discourse was repeated in youth groups throughout the city. When a man interested in boys came in touch with the men and boys of DeMolay, he felt he must tell about it. So by word of mouth, the order became a vital, enthusiastic, idealistic youth movement to inspire the young men of 1919 and the generations that were to follow. In back of it was the exciting march of history, the eternal search for the meaning of existence, and the stirring moments of the decline of the Order of Knights Templar in the tragic twilight of the Crusades. There are many theories as to just why DeMolay caught on and grew as if by magic. Most of the original group insist that in addition to Dad Land, it was the personality of Louis G. Lower, the first DeMolay, that led the small group into the realization of a worldwide order. He was truly a remarkable boy and man, a born leader. Others say that it was a successful baseball team that gave DeMolay its captain. Some maintain it was the drill led by Gib Langsdale as captain, or the band of 120 pieces, directed by Carl Trowbridge, or the orchestra, conducted by Dallas Elmore, or the quartet by Avril Tatlock singing the lead. Some say, and it is true, that without the dedicated leadership of prominent men in the Masonic fraternity, that DeMolay would have remained just a local boys' club. The real answer lies in all of the reasons given, plus a combination of all the elements loved by youth that now had a new meaning under the wise guidance of Frank S. Land. The most exciting theory to many is that the growth of DeMolay came as a result of perfect timing caused by the necessity for such an order, and of a man rising to the challenge of leadership. World War I was brought to an end on November 11, 1918, with the signing of an armistice. Old ways and old moral codes gave way to a newer concept as the Roaring Twenties began their carefree, dancing path into the future. This new look at life and the breaking of old restrictive chains was quickly picked up by the youth of the time, who had never seen Gay Paris, but liked the idea. It resulted in the age of the cake eater, the flapper, and the Charleston. One of the jingles of the time expressed it this way: "Blessings on thee, little dame, bareback girl with knees the same, with thy bobbed hair's jaunty grace, with thy makeup on thy face, with thy rollin' down silken hose, with thy thin transparent clothes. From my heart I wish thee joy, glad that I was born a boy. The rebellious minority among the young people had the full swing of publicity, but the overwhelming majority still longed to hold to the virtues and codes that have always been respected by right-thinking men. Many a youth risked popularity by refusing to go along with the crowd, and in doing so, felt that he was alone. And then, and here is the element of perfect timing, the timing to have at just that moment in history, a man like Dad Land to give, to pour out his personality to the teenage boy and restore a belief in idealism. It was as if the flaming smoke from a martyr's death had been blown across 400 years to serve as a beacon to one who could inspire boys by telling of chivalry, of great quests, of dedicated personalities, of the worth during all ages of filial love, reverence, courtesy, comradeship, fidelity, cleanness, and patriotism. For in every boy there is the desire to become the best he can. Many a man would testify in later years that the inspiration received in DeMolay remained with him through the years. Prominent Masons in Kansas City were quick to see the potential in this youth organization. They gave support, dedicated leadership, encouragement, and financial assistance. As the local chapter grew, Masonic bodies throughout the nation caught the vision of DeMolay. The idealism and youthful proficiency captured their attention and fired the imagination of the Masonic world as its members saw age-old teachings, set forth in a ritual not unlike their own ritualistic work. As Masonic leaders saw DeMolay for the first time, it was as if they had found a jewel placed in a new setting whose perfection must be told again and again. They recognized a rich opportunity for men to be of help to boys as they approached the years of manhood. These men gave inspired talks after they had seen the degrees. In a kind of wonder and a newfound enthusiasm, they would begin with the preceptor stations and deliver an oration about each jewel of a newfound crown of youth. One Master Mason, a prominent lawyer, saw the initiatory degree and when introduced to the chapter and invited to say a brief word, spoke for an hour. He became an old-time evangelist. He started his talk by the side of the master counselor, then made his way from one officer to another, repeating the lessons to be learned from each. His voice took added volume as he progressed, and he became increasingly vigorous, with arms waving as he put more body action into his movements. A cufflink was lost at the station of the first preceptor, another lost before the senior counselor, and his loosened tie was finally cast across the stand of the seventh preceptor. Then in a leap, he cleared 3 steps in one jump to stand, once more, by the side of the master counselor. His enthusiasm was tremendous. He might have drawn applause from William Jennings Bryan, but for the boys the hour was late. There was homework to be prepared for school the next day, and they had heard it before. Bill Lacey, one of the early members, and young as he was, a Marine during the war, said, "I enjoyed those talks. It made me feel that I was a part of something that was on the move. DeMolay had to grow. DeMolay began to spread across the prairies like a wildfire. More and more inquiries came from Masons and Masonic groups about the requirements necessary to form chapters similar to the one in Kansas City. On April 7, 1920, the officers and advisors of Mother Chapter drove by car the 80 miles to Trenton, Missouri, and there, under the guidance of Ray Denslow, a group of young men had assembled to be initiated into DeMolay. The march of 9 boys and a man had begun. Dad Land, in addressing the class, said, "I am happy to welcome each of you into DeMolay. I congratulate you and the Masonic Brethren of Trenton. Oh, by the way, my boys call me Dad, and I believe it would be a good precedent to call each advisor by that title of respect and appreciation. So I want Dad Denslow to now say a few words to us." A month later, on May 8, 1920, a chapter was instituted at Omaha, Nebraska. Dr. Zorro D. Clark, a prominent dentist of Omaha, and Kinsley Combs, a jeweler, had seen the working of DeMolay in Kansas City and asked for permission to form a chapter in their community. The degree team from Mother Chapter was taken to Omaha for this initial meeting of the first chapter formed outside the boundaries of Missouri. Masonic leaders in state after state, city after city, heard of DeMolay and, filled with the deep desire to be of helpfulness to youth, sought permission to form chapters. Harry Bundy, one of the grand personalities of DeMolay and for many years the jurisdictional officer for Colorado, tells how it began in his state. R. H. Malone, who was one of the first members of the Grand Council of Colorado, was attending a bankers' meeting in Kansas City at the time of the organization of DeMolay. Being an active Mason and deputy of the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, he went to the Scottish Rite temple and asks a man there, "What are all these kids doing around the Masonic temple at night?" The man happened to be Frank Land, and he said, "Why, this is a new organization. Would you like to see it, Brother Malone?" And Brother Malone was invited in to witness what must have been the organizational meeting of the members of the Order of DeMolay for Boys, which was the name they had chosen. Brother Malone witnessed the degrees at a later time and borrowed permission to take them to Colorado. The new consistory of Scottish Rite had several $100,000 and wanted an activity they could sponsor. Frank gave us permission to have an order there, but suggested we wait until September after the Omaha chapter had been instituted and the boys had further perfected their work by instituting the Huron chapter of DeMolay in Kansas City, Kansas. They came to Colorado after that, and DeMolay was starting to progress steadily. We reached the point where we thought 15 chapters should have a central agency, and we formed a state chapter of DeMolay. We decided our maximum would be 20. We now have 57 chapters, and we haven't scratched the surface. Each community wanted a chapter, and our own members journeyed to Lamar, Colorado Springs, even Grand Junction over the western slopes, and then north to Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley. Our boys instituted chapters in all our larger cities with very little to guide them, but with the sentiment that it was good for boys and that the Masons were back of them. Chapters were formed in San Antonio, Texas, Pittsburgh, Kansas, Duluth, Minnesota, St. Louis, Missouri, and San Francisco, California. By January 31st, 1921, there were 52 chapters with a membership of 2,216. On many of these trips to institute new chapters, Mother Chapter sent her degree team, band, patrol, and officers on a special train which would stop at towns en route where the band would play and the patrol would give their display of marching and precision drill. In October of 1921, the Mother Chapter degree team together with members of the Advisory Council were taken on a tour by railroad to institute DeMolay chapters at Toledo and Cleveland, Ohio, Hyattsville and Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., New York City, Indianapolis and Evansville, Indiana, and Louisville, Kentucky. Most of these cities had large classes of candidates. Indianapolis had a class of 744. For the year ending January 31st, 1922, 165 chapters rendered annual reports showing an active membership of 28,638. Each trip to institute a chapter was a glorious adventure. The boys coming from modest families had never been away from home. Together they thrilled to the motion of the train, eating in the diner, sleeping in the Pullman cars, and enjoying the luxury of hotels. Even Land, like Socrates who never ventured beyond the boundaries of Athens, had never traveled far away from his native city. In New York City they stayed at the Hotel Pennsylvania with rooms on the upper floors. The presentation of the degrees of DeMolay that night had received a standing ovation, and later the boys had made their memorable tour of the city. The night, to them, was still young, so they gathered in various rooms to talk, to eat smuggled-in food, and to share experiences. Coming from such a discussion group, Willis Shepard, junior deacon, discovered he had left his key in his room and now stood barefoot and in pajamas before a locked door. He was afraid of the razzing he would receive from the others if he went back to them for help and was too modest to take the elevator to secure another key at the hotel desk. To him, there was only one thing left to do. He walked down the 24 flights of stairs to the lobby. There he hid behind a column until a bellboy brought another key. Tired, and with the lobby empty of people, he was still too afraid to have someone see him clad only in pajamas, so he walked up the 24 floors back to his room. Gib Langsdale, during the trip to St. Louis, was quartered in the home of the master counselor of the newly created chapter. It was a pleasant house in the German sector of the city, where all the houses were similar with common side walls in the pattern of the row houses of that period and neighborhood. Gib was late one night coming home and alone. He climbed the few steps to the door and, as it was unlocked, quietly found his way across the living room to the stairs. Then softly he entered his bedroom and turned on the light. Instantly a scream wrenched the air, and a lady in bed began to hastily pull the covers around her and to scream again. Gibbs stammered an apology, retreated down the stairs, and stood shaking on the front stoop. He looked at the house and the next. They were all the same. Muttering to himself, he said, "What a fellow will do for DeMolay." And then, "I wonder which house I should try next." In another city, as the rooms were assigned, 2 members of the degree team were excited to find they had been given the bridal suite. Their excitement dimmed when they found 5 others were to share the suite with them. They found 7 beds in the room, and thinking the extra beds had been moved in, lifted each bed only to find deep impressions in the carpet that indicated that the beds were permanent fixtures. They spent the rest of the night wondering how a bridal suite could have 7 beds. But one of the boys rationalized by exclaiming, "They sure are comfortable." Leaving the hotel in Newark, New Jersey, the boys found Dad Land blocking the doors leading to the street. "Now, fellows, take your luggage back to your rooms and unpack. You might find that by mistake you have a few things that do not belong to you. The hotel manager tells me that there is a charge to me of $500 for such things as blankets, towels, silverware, and ashtrays. I know you all want souvenirs of the trip, but let's lighten our bags. Go back upstairs, take a recount. I will hold the bus until you get back." The concern of all was the perfection of the work to be presented in the next city. Weak points were smoothed out, and the members of the cast took increasing pride in the part assigned to him. It was on the train approaching Coldwater, Michigan, that Land suddenly became doubtful of the ability of Don Monroe, the new master counselor. Don had performed well in all offices, but this was a special challenge. So he called some of the boys together to frankly discuss placing Bill Lewis in Don's position. They said, "We want this to be good as much as you do. We vote for Don." After the investiture, it was Bill Lewis who said, "Monroe knocked him dead." The question was often put to those who made these trips about how they managed to be away for long periods of time and still remain in school, how they were able to maintain their grades and graduate. Their answer was, "We managed by applying ourselves both to our lessons and the pride we had in promoting DeMolay. Most of us had jobs after school as well. It was hard at times, but not one of us failed in school. 4 of us, however, were expelled for taking off one afternoon to sing in the DeMolay Quartet without permission of the school authorities. When we told Dad about it, he called Dr. Wallace A. Armour, president of the school board and a prominent Scottish Rite Mason, explained the situation, and we were reinstated. Dad Land always took care of his boys. He watched over us during the trips like a mother hen with a brood of chickens. He even gave us pink pills before we went to bed each night to keep us regular." At home, Mother Chapter continued to grow, and as more and more chapters were formed, DeMolay spread over the nation. Frank Land was forced to give up his work with the Masonic Relief Committee to give all of his time to the order he had founded. There was so much correspondence, so many people to see, and so many details of organization to be worked out that he could not divide his time nor give only half measure to DeMolay. He extended his energy without measure and seemed bewildered at times at a growth which was rapidly placing DeMolay as one of the outstanding youth groups of the nation. In February of 1923, as he entered his apartment, Nell's cheerful greeting was, "Hello, Sock. This must have been a great day. Your eyes are smiling. You look like something good happened. Come on now, tell me." "Honey," he said, "we have just given permission for the chapter at Grand Forks, North Dakota, to go to Winnipeg, Canada, to institute a DeMolay chapter there on February 24th. Think of what it means to have a Canadian chapter. DeMolay will now be international. Our boys' club will become the International Order of DeMolay."